Jeopardy! Host Ken Jennings is set to come under increased pressure with Ryan Seacrest's arrival on Wheel of Fortune, the U.S. Sun has exclusively learned. Ken, 50, has spent this year settling into his role as sole host of Jeopardy! After co-host Mayim Bialik was let go. Now he faces a fresh challenge as Ryan, 49, takes over from legendary Wheel of Fortune host Pat Sajak. And a Sony television insider says it could get ugly for Ken if Jeopardy's numbers start to dip compared to the studio's other beloved game show. The source said, for decades, Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy! Have been very evenly matched when it comes to ratings and popularity, but they actually draw two different audiences. The U.S. Jeopardy! Fans typically come from bigger cities, while Wheel pulls more from Middle America. Now that both shows are going into this fall with their new hosts in place, that equilibrium is poised to be disrupted, and at Sony Television, you can feel the excitement as Ryan settles in and starts getting his first episodes as host. He's bringing a sense of youth and urgency to the job that is a lot harder to pull off than it looks, and Wheel is bound to get a bump in the numbers once his episodes start running in September. My advice to Ken is that just because Mayim is out of the picture doesn't mean he shouldn't watch his back. Tricky situation. The source added that there's one pitfall Ken must avoid above all else. Taking the Jeopardy! Audience for granted is the worst possible thing he could do right now, with Ryan poised to reinvent the Wheel franchise with his top 40 radio sensibility and unflappable optimism, the insider claimed. In most media markets these shows run back-to-back, and Ken needs to make sure he doesn't suffer from the contrast with Ryan. It's a tricky situation because their personalities are so radically different from one another. Ken and Mayim were announced as Jeopardy! Co-hosts in July 2022, succeeding Alex Trebek. It came after Alex's death from pancreatic cancer in November 2020. After featuring a series of guest hosts, it was announced that producer Mike Richards and actress Mayim would be taking over as co-hosts. But Richards was forced to resign in August 2021 after sexist comments online resurfaced. Ken stepped in to split hosting duties with Mayim but took over as the permanent host for season 40 of the show. Ryan's time. Meanwhile, longtime American Idol host Ryan is taking over from Pat, 77, after he retired last month. Announcing his new gig in June last year, Ryan said, "I'm truly humbled to be stepping into the footsteps of the legendary Pat Sajak." In March, Ken was seen playfully joking about hosting Wheel himself. In a clip posted on Instagram, Ken responded to a fan who asked what's it like hosting a show that you know all the answers to. Ken laughed and added, "It hasn't happened yet. I don't know, maybe they'll let me do Wheel someday." Some fans took it as a dig at Ryan, with one posting on social media, "Not him coming for Ryan's job before he even starts." But the U.S. Sun source said, "I don't think Sony will let this turn into a more intense rivalry." The bottom line is that it's all about the ratings for both shows. There's no other measure of success. Sticking with Ken? Ken currently has no long-term contract with the show. A source previously claimed to the U.S. Sun Ken has made it known to higher-ups that he's in it for the long haul. The source claimed, Jeopardy! Is Ken's religion, he lives it, and he breathes it, and despite all the outside pressures, he's not going to mess this up. Of course, he acknowledges that nobody could ever fill the shoes of Alex Trebek, an icon and someone Ken himself looked up to as a personal hero. The source continued, "What he really wants more than anything is to stick around and make this position work for the long run. And if that means making less money to ensure his longevity, you can bet your life he'd be game." This isn't all about the money, they added. It's a way of life for Ken and then some. He's in it for the long run and to secure his status in the show's history. Ken made $2.5 million from his record 74-game run as a contestant, $4.3 million including tournaments. Alex reportedly made $10 million a year by the end of his 36-year tenure. Jeopardy! Host Ken Jennings had always been known for his wit, quick reflexes, and encyclopedic knowledge of trivia. But lately, something else was creeping into his mind: competition. A new rival was on the horizon, one who was already a household name and beloved by millions, Ryan Seacrest. Seacrest, the charismatic host of American Idol and a media juggernaut in his own right, was preparing to take over the reins of Wheel of Fortune, a show with a legacy almost as long as Jeopardy's. Ken had known this day was coming ever since Pat Sajak announced his retirement. The news had sent shockwaves through the world of television, with speculations flying left and right about who would succeed the legendary host. When Seacrest was officially named as the new host of Wheel of Fortune, it seemed like the natural choice. He was polished, professional, and had a magnetic charm that could draw in audiences from all demographics. But as Seacrest's debut approached, the media buzz grew louder, and it wasn't long before Ken started hearing whispers within the industry. "Watch your back," a colleague had joked one day, but there was an undercurrent of seriousness to the remark. The implication was clear: Seacrest could become a formidable rival, and his presence might even cause a shift in the balance of power between the two shows. Jeopardy! And Wheel of Fortune had long been considered sister shows, airing back-to-back and appealing to a similar audience. But with Seacrest stepping in, there was a new dynamic at play. Seacrest wasn't just any host, he was a brand, a phenomenon. And with him at the helm, Wheel of Fortune might very well experience a resurgence, potentially drawing viewers away from Jeopardy! Ken tried to brush off the concerns. After all, he had faced competition before. He had competed on Jeopardy! As a contestant and emerged victorious time and time again. But this was different. This wasn't just about trivia knowledge, it was about television ratings, public appeal, and maintaining the relevance of a show that had become a cultural institution. As the days passed, Ken found himself reflecting more and more on what Seacrest's debut could mean for him and Jeopardy! He knew the industry was cutthroat, and while Jeopardy! Had a loyal fan base, television was ultimately a numbers game. Ratings mattered, and a dip in viewership could lead to all sorts of changes that might not favor him. One evening, Ken was scrolling through social media when he stumbled upon a tweet from a well-known television critic. "Can't wait to see Ryan Seacrest on #Wheel of Fortune. Could this be the shakeup that finally dethrones #Jeopardy? Watch out, Ken Jennings." The tweet sent a chill down his spine. He knew it was just one person's opinion, but it echoed the sentiments he had been hearing more frequently. The idea that Wheel of Fortune could lower Jeopardy's ratings was no longer just a hypothetical, it was a possibility that was beginning to gain traction.